So good morning, everybody. My name is Gerry Botha. I've got also with me Steve Brown, and we're going to talk about electrical connections. Steve, you want to join in quickly?
Yeah, morning everyone, and welcome, Gerry. It's good to be back having a dual discussion here as we've had in the past. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Okay, 100%. So hopefully we'll get some of your grumpy plumber inserts here as well, Steve.
No, we can't do that. This is the one where I've got to be PG.
Yeah,
But
right.
yeah, but Gerry, this stemmed from this discussion that we're talking, this elephant in the room, stemmed from a conversation that was had, or a request coming through by email, basically advising that plumbers can do the electrical. And I think, we've discussed this before. We know where it is and where the risks are. And I think it's pertinent that we kick it off again and just reiterate this elephant in the room. So over to you, Gerry.
Yeah, so as you said, Steve, it's all about the electrical connections being done by plumbers. And if we just have a look at what our plumbing standards tell us, in all of these, I mean, we go right through from 10252 part 1, 252, 254 in terms of electrical geyser installations, through to solar, through to heat pumps. And all of them, somewhere in that regulation, points to the that the electrical installation needs to comply to the requirements of SANS 10142. And, having said that, we need to also understand that obviously we're trying to comply in terms of 10142 with regards to the disconnecting device, which is the isolating switch or isolator switch within 1.5 meter from the appliance, according to that regulation. And then also, in terms of bonding, the bonding between hot and cold water, and the bonding towards, to the earth continuity conductor system, or the earth of the geyser. So I think most of our audience will understand that is the minimum requirement that's needed to obviously, have this installation safe. And again, it points more to the electrical geyser installation replacements or repairs, as well as the solar water heating installations, and also domestic heat pumps. And I think in all of this, the critical considerations always is to, number one, make sure that the client has got the hot water, that we do not, leave them without hot water. That's, I think, in most instances, the most critical one. And in terms of compliance, or maybe, in terms of health and safety, occupational health and safety, is to leave the installation in a safe manner. And therein lies some of the challenges. Steve, maybe you can expand a little bit more on that.
Yeah, Gerry, I think that this becomes the challenge that we have, especially from a replacement point of view, where the plumbers are contracted to the insurance, and we understand the logistics of trying to get an electrician there at the same time as the plumber, obviously the costs. And I think that, as many times as we said it, it's a problem that exists and it's real. And unfortunately, all of these items that you've been talking about in terms of the various standards come into play on a daily basis. I mean, you and I have discussed how many geysers are replaced in a month, Gerry? What were we around about 10,000?
Yeah, more or less 10,000 countrywide. So that's quite a number.
So, unfortunately, it's become the norm, in terms of electrical connections being done by plumbers, and it contravenes what the standard says in terms of who can actually do this installation. And I know we've had engagements with the ECA and various departments in terms of trying to find a solution to this problem. But as we stand now, there is no change to this, and who can do this work is very clearly set out within the standards that you've said, Gerry.
100%. Like, if we go back to 10142, and this is the type of picture that would be acceptable in terms of bonding between hot and cold, as well as, bonding to the earth conductor. And this is the way, or what we have promoted all along, is this is the correct way to do it. And obviously not this twisting of wires, and there is not really a connection there. So that obviously in essence is what is being failed in terms of the COC audit inspection in general. But if we look at the real facts of the matter, is that if we look at the building control or the national building regulation in 10400A, there's a specific description for a plumber. And a plumber is being defined as a person that has passed a qualified trade test and has been issued with a certificate of proficiency. And again, pointing back to that same regulation, A18, talks about the legality of a plumbing installation. And it says here, unless this person is a trained plumber or works under the adequate control of a trained plumber, or an approved competent person, you cannot do this work. And in section 4 there, it says any person not being a trained plumber or not being a person contemplated who practices the trade of plumbing shall be guilty of an offense, and similar to a person that allows a person or an unqualified plumber to work shall be guilty of an offense. And when we look at our industry, we obviously always trying to protect our qualified plumbers, people in our industry, our members. And this is what all of this is based on. However, if we go to the electrical side, SANS 142, in terms of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, and here's also a clear definition. And it says, it also requires a registered person as defined, in other words, either a master installation electrician or electrical tester for single phase. Only those people can issue a certificate of compliance together with a test report for any installation falling under that regulation. And geyser installations is one of those where, and this is what the legislation is telling us, the Department of Labor, the Occupational Health and Safety. So herein lies the problem. Steve, and it's like, it's unfortunately, if we look at, here's a document that was issued by the Department of Labor on the 26th of July. And again, it says, no person may do electrical installation work as an electrical contractor unless that person has been registered as an electrical contractor in terms of these regulations. So here we go. Where do we draw the line? I don't know if you want to maybe expand a little bit on this, Steve.
Yeah, so Gerrie, I mean, it's clear. It really is clear. And currently there's no way forward in this. I mean, every day we have plumbing contractors that are actually breaking this law. And, a solution has to be found somewhere. But right now, we know that some of the plumbers have been noting that, get a certified electrician to come in and make sure that it's been done correctly. You and I did discuss last week where this has been done and the electrician has been called in and by the consumer, and it's been found to be okay. But the argument comes up in, well, I've just wasted 600 Rand or whatever it is by calling out the electrician. So it's a very fine line that we sort of treading in terms of this. I mean, as I said to you before, the ECA have been very clear. This is the regulation. This is where it is. And, some plumbers have said, okay, it's a temporary connection. You and I discussed it last week in terms of how long is temporary? It's working, it's fine. There doesn't seem to be a problem until there is. And I think this is where we need to get to in terms of understanding what we can and what we can't do.
Yeah, and if you look at, the last paragraph on this page here, it was contained in that same document that was issued by the Department of Labor, where they actually addressed the homeowners buildings and businesses, and they urge these guys to only appoint a competent and legally registered electrical contractor to do this work. So we are sitting in a situation, and we understand in terms of the plumbing installation and specifically geysers, when it comes to repairs and replacement, it has become common practice that, and maybe generally accepted or expected, that the plumber needs to disconnect and reconnect because, there's a financial implication in terms of pricing. Now, I mean, you've actually painted the picture the other day. Imagine if you have to get an electrical contractor now to come and disconnect the geyser. The plumber then takes over, does whatever needs to be done. It takes him 2 to 3 hours to get this whole thing done. And the electrician then needs to reconnect, test, and issue whatever testing report and or COC that's needed. And therein lies the problem is, we in a lot of instances are forced to do things. And the question is, in terms of legislation, can anybody force you to do something illegal? Steve, you and I had this discussion as well. Is it the right thing to do? That's the question. Steve?
Yeah, so I think, Gerry, when we spoke about it, when we spoke about this, I mean, it's quite clear that nobody can force you to break the law, and in many cases, if you're driving at 140 k's an hour and you never get caught, it doesn't mean to say that the speed limit has changed. And I think, from IOPS's perspective, and we know this, and we're not having a go at the contractors because this is outside of where they are. They've been tied to this, or they've been told to engage the services of an electrician, or there's some level of competency there. And let's be honest, the guys are quite competent in the majority of cases in doing this. However, when it comes to, if there is a claim, what do you stand on? How do you defend that, Gerry, if there is a claim? And we've seen, your pictures that you've got. We've seen many fires, and they may be because of the connections, or they may have been, faulty components, whatever. But the reality of it comes down to, in any of these instances, if there was ever a fire, who's the first person that they point the finger at, Gerry?
Yeah, they will obviously look at the last person that worked on that installation, and 9 times out of 10, it would be the plumber that did the replacement of this geyser. And, we need to be very careful of what do we do, and, what do we expose ourselves to. If you look at this one, I mean, there it's clearly the source of this whole thing was around the electrical connections there, or maybe the wire sizes, or whatever the case may be, is that in this instance, the plumber has now opened the door where he is going to be held responsible. And if we look at this one, and this is a story that was running in June 2021, where a couple coming back from honeymoon was electrocuted while having a shower, and they both died. So the question is, if we look at all of this, who will be held responsible? And unfortunately, that will be the person that worked on that installation the last. In other words, you, the installer, that did that connection. And what more is there to say? And I think, the purpose of this is to once again just reiterate to the plumbers out there that you are doing things that, in terms of all the legislation, as we saw before, is not legal. And on top of that, there should be an electrical COC issued for each of these installations. So my question, or my last thing that I can say about this, is the risk worth it? Do we really want to expose ourselves? And it's as a warning to the plumbers to say, guys, think twice. And I think some of the challenges are that the installer may not even be the qualified plumber, and may not have all the knowledge and the ability, and even the testing equipment make sure that his installation is safe. Steve, I don't know if you've got anything more to say about this.
Yeah, and I think, Kerry, you're quite right in what you're discussing there, and what you're saying is that there are challenges. And, we see it in terms of non-compliance with regards to plumbing. Now we're stepping into the boundary of the electrical space. So yeah, there's a lot of work to do there, and we get it. As we discussed last week, we get it. The plumbers are between a rock and a hard place in terms of what they can, they can't do, and if they contracted to do so. In some cases, they may cover it by saying, get a certified electrician to come out and do it. And we've seen it, where geysers are relocated. Let's give it the due. The geysers relocated, it's outside on the wall or wherever they've relocated to do. There is an electrician that's engaged to go and do that from the DB board, amend the pipework. But then comes the question of the earthing and bonding. So many of the times we've seen it, Kerry, where the electrical bonding and the earthing is not done. And then we have this crossover where the electrician says, no, that's the plumber's job. And it falls within the parameter and the scope of the plumber. So there's a fine line. All we're trying to do here is make the plumber aware of the risks that they could possibly have, and we hope that they don't, but that there is the strong possibility. And on what basis would you stand if there was an eventuality of an incident where somebody was injured or killed? How would you be able to defend it?
Yeah, I think, Steve, that's the big message is that, again, going back to the beginning, is that the critical thing is to, whatever you do, leave that installation as safe as possible. But in doing that, unfortunately, we are overstepping our boundaries. And as you say, this is not there to crucify anybody, but it's there once again to maybe just make the plumbers attend that we're doing things that because we are forced to, or because we want to try and make the installation safe. But are we actually making it safe? That's one of the questions. And Steve, you mentioned something last week as well in terms of the replacement of an element. In some instances, the electrician may do it, but then he's might be interfering with the plumbing works, and the other way around. The plumber does it, he's now interfering with the electrical installation. So it is always a gray area. And at this point in time, there's not really an answer in terms of, what do we call it? A pathway where you can be, what do we say? You can be protected if something goes wrong. So once again, it's there, and this session is meant to, again, bring your attention to the risks involved in the situation. And as you said, Steve, we've made contact with the professional bodies for the electricity. They were thinking about it, they were humming and hawing, but there's nothing coming from them, and they stick to their guns to say this is what the legislation says.
Oh, they will, Gerry, and I think kudos to them, because they actually do go after you, in terms of that. I had that experience many, many years ago. But I think the key thing is how do you protect yourself? I mean, like I said earlier, the plumber does it, advises the consumer that, he's done it, and as far as he can see, it's okay, but, maybe they should get an electrician in. And then you have that sort of reverse sort of kick and backside when they come back and say it's all fine, but now why did I have to get hold of an electrician? It cost me 700 rand. Sometimes it's maybe a bit of communication between the insurers or whatever. I don't know what the answer is in terms of it. All I'm saying is, Mr. Plumber, protect yourself. And we've got to ask the question, as you and I discussed last week, how do we feel about, you raised up the standard, in terms of the plumber, in terms of 10400 A18. How do we feel when others impact on our trade or start doing things? I mean, is it okay for tomorrow for the aircon guys to do heat pumps, and then we've got electricians replacing geysers? And, as that one circular we had the other day, that came through saying, no, solar is an energy, therefore it must be electrical. There's just so many gray areas, but we need to just protect ourselves, Gerrie.
Yeah, 100%. And, you know, as you say, Steve, the challenge that we have here is that although we know what the right thing is to do, we are under, sometimes we're doing these things because we are forced to. But the big thing is that I would, in my personal opinion, if I may, say that, you know, I'd rather take a bit of a tongue lash by the client or from the client to say, you know, it cost me 600 or 700 rand more than it, you know, out of my own pocket, than to just leave it. And you saw the pictures before. I mean, if something goes wrong, and it happens more often than we actually think, because I mean, Steve, you and I being on a lot of these WhatsApp groups, we see these photos coming through on a weekly basis now, where there are things that go wrong. And unfortunately, the plumber is going to be the guy that's going to be held responsible. And on top of that, you know, we're quick to say as plumbers, but I've only done this part of the job, and that's what my COC covers. And then I walk away because I'm not responsible. And similar in terms of the electrical. So once again, it's just there to again put it under the attention of all the guys out there. We've got to be very, very careful where we step, and we don't open doors. Try and protect you to the best of your ability right now, because you know what's going to happen in future, we don't know.
Yeah, but Gerrie, I think if we had to go on, and anybody that's attending this webinar, if they had to put their hand up and say, how many of you guys have been shocked while replacing a geyser or whatever the case may be? I think 100% of the guys have got a kick from somewhere, or there's a back feed into it or whatever. So we've all experienced that. We've seen the photos where bare wires, isolated boxes cracked. We've seen some horrendous types of installations, Gerrie, and every single one of those would put the plumber at risk. So again, this stemmed from people saying that IOPSA said, or this one particular male said, that they had been training by IOPSA, and it was stipulated that plumbers can do electrical. I hope we've covered that very clearly today, Gerrie.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, we cannot approve of that. And to my knowledge, IOPSA has never said that a plumber can do electrical connections. What we are trying to say is protect yourself in whatever way you can, number one. Number two, we need to abide to the laws. As you said, you know, the fact that you can or is able to drive at 160 kilometers an hour for weeks on end doesn't make it, or doesn't change the speed limit. So we've got to be very careful where we tread.
Yeah, and Gerrie, I mean, I know things are tough out there. I really do, and I know that, you know, there's many guys that are on panels that'll be listening to this and saying, "What do we do? You know, how do we go about this? What's right and what's wrong?" And I wish we had the answer, Gerrie. You know, I really do. You know, if there was some form of competency that the individuals should go and have a look at. But you know, again, you know, in terms of the Department of Labor, you know, it's very clear who can do it and who can't. And yeah, until such time as that's been addressed or amended in some way or form, I think the clearest thing is, like you've said, is advise the consumer, you know, that you've done it, you've put it back as it was, or whatever the case may be. But you know, when it starts coming into now just install an isolator, then you're starting with DB boards and all kinds of things. Yeah, you'd rather stay away from it and advise them of it, or negotiate with somebody that you can get a decent rate. Hopefully you're getting enough geysers that the guy can possibly give you a better rate in terms of doing it. But yeah, it is a really difficult one, and I feel for the guys. I mean, I've done it, you know, in my terms when I was replacing geysers. We've all done it somewhere. But, you know, fortunately, yes, I did get caught by doing a temporary connection, and somebody in the body corporate blew the whistle, and I had a phone call from the Electrical Contractors Association, wanted to fine me, but that was amicably resolved. And fortunately, there was nobody injured or anything in terms of that. We merely connected that geyser up so the client could have hot water, and every one of us has done that. Whether they call somebody in to do it afterwards is unknown. I've seen users plugged in, just as a temporary, just to plug things in. And we do that as plumbers. We tend to think about the consumer, but then the consequences to us, because we plugged it in and ran an extension or whatever we've done just to get them hot water. So protect yourself, Hetty. I think that's the only thing we can say to the guys, whichever way is going to work for you, whether you put that disclaimer in or you advise them of it, whichever way, but protect yourself so that the consumer also makes an informed decision. I think that's what the non-compliance notice is there for, Hetty, is to make sure that the consumer is aware of it. If you've walked out of there and told him, look, I've connected it up, it's, get somebody to go and check it. If they do or don't, you've advised them, in writing as what the requirements are. But for my choice, and I'm shit scared of electricity, sorry for my French, but I am. It's something I don't understand. I put the lights on and they go off when I switch it off. But when it comes to testing and doing these type of things, it's something that I've always left alone.
100%, Steve. Yeah, and I think again, I think it comes back to us as plumbers, where also in our regulations there's a stipulation that we need to inform the consumer or the user in writing of non-compliances. Now, not being 100% sure whether this electrical reconnection is actually compliant, that's one of the ways to maybe protect yourself, to say is, I'm not sure whether it is compliant. Please consult with a registered electrician to come and do this. And also remember in terms of the labor law, there's a COC that needs to be issued for electricity as well on this installation. So maybe that for the moment is one of the ways to look at it.
Yeah, and
so Steve,
we've also seen other products market. Yeah, I think we've also seen other products coming into the market that are again the same, where it's a dual plumbing cutting into the systems and then connecting it up to PVs and everything else. I mean, these are also things that are coming into the market that we tend to install, and that again may compromise.
Yeah, so Steve, I don't know whether there's much more to say about this. I think we have come to a point where all we can say is just weigh the risks, see whether it's worth it to do it, and if so, protect yourself in the best manner you can. And that's basically the last words from me, Steve. And other than that, just say thank you for the attendance, thank you for being here, and we hope that we do the right thing going forward. Steve, last words from you.
Yeah, Gerry, I think thank you to everyone, for those in attendance, Gerry, and to those that have put it together. I hope, again, that we haven't created more confusion than there is in the market. Let's just be clear. Let's follow the rules, do the right thing, and cover ourselves, protect ourselves at all times. Gerry, I thank you. Take care and have a super day.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And yeah, have a good one. Cheers, everybody. Bye.